Serious, what is the story of your worst date? From the get-go, talking to her was honestly like talking to a fucking brick wall. If I asked her a question, her reply was typically one word or at most a single sentence. And no questions in return or any effort to keep the conversation going. At one point, she got up to go to the toilet, and the older woman who was sitting at the table next to us leaned over and whispered to me, "I have to say, I really admire your patience. She is a nightmare." Quote, "That's hilarious. I love that lady." He stuck his fingers in my dessert, licked his fingers and did it again. I ordered a lemon meringue pie and offered him to some. He said no, only to then proceed to say, "Actually that looks good," and sticks his fingers in for a taste. Yuck. That's disgusting.
I had been seeing this guy for a few months but he kept me on the down low, didn't want to commit. Finally took me out to dinner in public. We sat at the bar. A little after we ordered, his two friends got to the bar and he immediately got up before they spotted us. He went over to them and sat and ate dinner with him and texted me not to come over. So I sat alone for most of the night until his friends left.
He is married. I had the exact same thought. Nothing else makes sense. So many stories, but one of the worst. Sorry it's a bit long. I matched with this guy on Tinder, and he offered to take me out to dinner. I thought that sounded nice, so later that night he picked me up. We were driving and he asked me where I wanted to go. I told him I was fine with anything. He said, "Okay then," and pulled into Subway. He then told me that he wasn't hungry, but that I should eat. So he stood outside of the Subway and watched while I went in and got myself food. At this point I was already mentally done, but I wanted to see how much worse it would get. Spoiler, it got so much worse. So I'm sitting in the car with the stupid fucking sub on my lap, and he decided that it was a great idea to drive around, specifically through a dark, isolated ravine that was nearby. He drove for about 10 minutes into the ravine, parked the car next to an abandoned tennis court and said, "Okay, you can eat now." I was just thinking, I really don't want to die here. So I choked down the soggy sub while he stared at me. The second I was done, he pulled the car out and drove me back home. I was so grateful to make it home in one piece that it took me several days to process how fucked up the entire date was. The cherry on top, at 2 a.m. that night, he came back to my house uninvited, carrying a bag full of stale donuts, and asked me if I wanted to have sex. But it had to be without a condom since he didn't have any.
How did you know the donuts were stale? Hey, I was a broke college student. I couldn't not take the donuts.
He took off his pants. After a first date of dinner and a movie, he asked if I'd like to have some fun. I said no. He apologized for overstepping himself. I told him, "Hey, I totally understand and it's okay." Quote, now the confusing part, he took my word, "okay," as consent for, "I totally want to do sex now." So he immediately and quickly took off his pants. Such awkwardness when I explained it was still a no.
So it's not my date. Because my bad dates are just boringly regular stuff. But working in bars and restaurants, I've been able to witness some absolute doozies. And boy does this one take the cake. So, it's a fairly quiet night and it's pretty early. And I have a reservation for 6 p.m. for 2 people. Young guy shows up for that reservation about 10 minutes early. Tells me he's very nervous, as he's on a first date, and hasn't been on many of them. All that kind of jazz. Kinda sweet really. Anyways, I seat him, and the girl arrives, like, 30 minutes late. She then proceeds to get extremely drunk. About halfway through the meal, though, she answers her phone, takes the call, and starts talking about her date. In front of her date. Saying stuff like, "He's not really my type. I don't exactly like him but I figured I had nothing else planned tonight so why not?" Young man looks super discouraged, pays his bill, and leaves. He's a nice lad. I've seen him a few times at the bar I work at now. Fuck that chick. I would have just walked out and left her the tab.
Went out with guy from work who I didn't know much about. He turned out to be a dick in many ways and was drunk when I showed up. Lowlight of the night was when he started douchily heckling the small cover band that was playing in the bar. The guy on the mic said, "I'll give you $10 out of my own pocket if you can tell me this girl's name," and you guessed it. He literally blanked on my name in front of a room full of people. Edit. Forgot the kicker. The next day he texted me saying, "You can try again," as if I was the one who blew it. You can try again. LMAO. He didn't have much but the audacity. I got a girl's number and went to the dentist a few days later. 4 wisdom teeth and a lot of drugs later. I apparently showed the dentist her number as my emergency pickup. I have no memory of these events, but apparently she picked me up, took me to the pharmacy for my medication, and dropped me off at my apartment, where I passed out. That was our first and only date. Apparently I didn't make a good impression. Can't blame her for that. I have no idea why the dentist office drugged up me for a pickup number. I assume they couldn't reach my primary help number, but I never asked. I went out one night with some of my girlfriends. I was the young, naive girl in our group. We went to this bar that is on a lake and had a great time drinking margaritas. I met a guy, we danced, laughed, really clicked. My girlfriends were ready to go. I didn't want to. He was making promises that he could get me home, but the DD in our group put her foot down and said we had to go. We exchanged numbers and made promises to talk soon, and the DD took us girls home.
The next day, I get a text from him. I'm so excited because he had to be interested if he texts the next day, right? We made plans for dinner and he offers to pick me up. Him. So, pick you up at the same address? Quote. Me. Same address. What are you talking about? Him. The house I dropped you off at. Me. You didn't drop me off? Quote. Him. Shut up. We had sex in your driveway. Me. Monsieur. No, we did not. Him. Yes, we did. Quote. Me. I'm really confused. And I think you are too. But I'm not the girl you went home with last night. So the date died before it ever got started. Grateful for the DD though. She was a lifesaver.
Did he reply OMG?
Went out with a guy who was a medic in the Navy. He looked nothing like his pictures, but I carried on out of politeness. Over the course of the next 3 hours, he bragged about all of the people he knew who had successfully killed themselves. Bragged about how many times he had encouraged suicidal people to kill themselves and how he had often self-harmed with them. To make things worse, he worked in the hospital and was telling me how he would give depressed patients sharp objects and tell them that it was less paperwork for him to do if they killed themselves. He also didn't have a clue about most medical conditions and would just send people away telling them they're fine. He finished off by telling me about his really messed up family and how his 2 13 to 15-year-old brothers had been arrested for stealing and burning cars, and his sister kept trying to stab all the family members. Suffice to say, I made a swift exit and never went on Tinder again.
Did you ever report him to the hospital or authorities or anything? There are some messed up people in the military. West Point was within my Tinder radius, and even a lot of them had a screw loose at that young age. One of my worst dates was an Iraq vet who told me he got so bored on deployment he branded his initials into his forearms, then proceeded to show them to me like he thought it was impressive. Thank you so much for watching and have a good day.